Good to go, John?
Good to go.
You feel fired up? I need some shine. I don't want to... That's not heaps COVID, so.
That's used shine.
It's taking the shine off it.
That's right. Shine without shine.
I'll give you a shiner. Maybe then people
Don't
punch
do
you in
that.
the face.
That would hurt.
Yeah, that's right. That's what
You
a
get a
shiner
shiner?
is.
Yeah, it's a black eye.
A black eye, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a shiner.
Yeah, tell you
I
what.
haven't heard that
I've
saying in a
given
long
out a
time.
few of those in my time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially in chip lunch when people have get the wrong
That's
answer.
right. Can't put a saddle on this bronco. Welcome to the Chip Lunch Podcast and welcome to the Third Space studio here at Soul Revival Church. I'm very excited to be talking about how we grew up as Christians again with a very special guest. But before I get to our guest, my name's Joel, by the way. Ethan, you're back on the podcast.
I'm back. I've making my return. Triumphant.
It sounds like that shine's taking its effect on
I'm
you.
currently drinking, for those who are not watching this, if you can
Check it out on YouTube.
check it out on YouTube. I'm drinking an energy drink called Shine Plus. It's quite effective.
Do you want to read off some ingredients here? Because
Let's go.
I don't think they're that bad. Like, not too bad for you anyway.
Green coffee beans, green tea, L-theanine, I don't know, turmeric and ginkgo biloba, and there's some other nice stuff in there as well, like, I don't know.
What
natural.
flavour is it?
It is orange mango.
Ooh, I need to try some of that.
Yeah, it's actually
Anyway.
pretty good.
Right, let's stop talking about shine. Let's talk about our guest, John. How are you, mate?
I'm well, thank you. I'm just wondering, is there any musk stick going on in that shine?
No,
Ooh.
but I'll have a good musk stick.
Green musk sticks. That could be interesting.
That would be delicious.
Yeah,
Goodness me.
That'd give you a bit of shine.
It really would, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's fantastic to have you on, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
joining
it's
us.
good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really cool to have you on.
Great opportunity.
Yeah, what an opportunity! You're going to take advantage of this opportunity. What are you
Might be able to plug my wares.
Oh,
Yeah.
what are you
Hey.
selling? That's what's exciting. As we ask every single guest that comes on, the first question is always, how do you like to have your hot chips?
How do I like to have my hot chips? Typically a bit of mustard and,
Whoa.
and
We haven't-
barbecue sauce.
Wow, we haven't
At
had
the
mustard
same
before.
time?
Yeah, at the same time.
That's
mixed in.
amazing.
Yep.
Just before we move on, what kind of salt?
Plain salt.
Yes!
I don't want chicken.
Well, you're not having chicken salt
Not-
if
not
you're having
chicken.
mustard and barbecue.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right.
it.
That's just too much going on.
Way too much going
Wow,
on.
there is a lot going on there. Why? So
That's
do you know why?
amazing.
How did you come across this? Like,
Oh, I just came across, and I noticed when I'd been out at various functions, I'd seen people that had dipped a chip in the yellow mustard and then dipped it in something like the brown barbecue sauce. So there were stripes in there, so you could see it. And I thought, oh, someone's actually tried both of these. I thought, this is a good tactic. I'm going to give this a crack.
nice.
And so I've come along behind them and done the similarly unsocial thing and dipped
Double
the
dip.
hot chip into the mustard and then into the barbecue sauce and thought, wow, this rocks.
That is
Actually
amazing.
works. Yeah.
It's almost like I love the flavor of mustard on a burger, for example, like American mustard, because it's like they do that in like a McDonald's cheeseburger. It's got the tomato sauce and then the mustard together, just makes them mad flavors.
And not too hot. You know, and I'm not interested in rocket fuel.
Yeah, either am I really for mustard.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that fast.
Yeah.
We might need to get some mustard. Maybe we should start putting the sauces on the table, Ethan.
Only if you let us include chicken salt. Okay.
No, chicken salt's
Okay,
allowed.
so-
I just don't agree with it.
Fun fact: I saw a little while ago we had this thing where we made this joke about having a portable chicken salt shaker
Right.
On your keyring, right?
on your keyring.
Oh,
and
okay.
I was like, oh, that'd be a really funny little like merch drop or something. And I'm like, oh, it's just silly. But there is a market for it that I didn't know existed.
Oh.
Because if you go to, I think it's 7-Elevens or maybe I think it's Caltex's. Anyway,
Ampoles now. They're turning it all
Ampoles,
into
sorry,
Ampoles.
yeah.
Right, our
The
Ampoles.
the 4 and 20 pie
Yeah.
people. If you buy one of those, you get a free tomato sauce on a keychain.
Oh,
And I was like,
Really?
this is our opening.
there is a market.
There is a market, and yes, it's for free. But so no one's actually buying these things, but they're buying pies to get tomato sauce on a keychain.
Yeah. So the disappointing thing is that the market is ahead of you.
It is. Yeah, you're right.
Yep,
We need to catch up.
Yep.
That's
Oh,
right,
yeah.
but we can still catch
We
the
can.
wave.
We can still do it.
Innovate, move ahead of the curve.
That's exactly
Get in
right.
front.
Yeah.
Get in front of the wave, guys. It's coming.
But it's a real thing. So I was pretty shook by that. It was,
Yeah.
very exciting.
Only found by someone that spends a lot of time in
So there's
petrol
a plug.
service,
Yeah.
petrol stations.
Yeah.
There's a plug now. You're plugging some wares.
Exactly
Go to your
right.
Ampol servo,
Get your 4 and 20
pie,
key-
and your little keyring
tomato
shaker.
sauce keychain.
Okay.
And
With some
then
plain salt.
we'll get the salt shaker keychain.
Yeah. Just a chip lunch branded one.
Yeah.
That'd actually be pretty cool.
I'd be all about that.
I think we might need to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Put it on the list of many things you've got to do, Ethan.
I'll do it next week.
John.
It'll be on the website.
Yeah. Well, just whisper it quietly.
We'll plug later.
There's a Soul Revival shop coming.
There's a shop coming.
Yeah, with clothing.
That's really
on
exciting.
that one.
Whoa. There's going to be a shop.
Shh. Coming soon. John. Shh. Don't tell anyone. This is not going out on the internet.
Not at all.
Yeah. John, the next question we want to ask is, how did you become a Christian?
So pretty boring story, really. I guess it was
no story is ever boring.
I
No, I don't want to hear that. Let's hear your story.
way
not
back in the
boring.
beginning, my mum took me along to Sunday school. Caringbah Prezzies it was. Bit of a plug there for the old Presbyterians.
Down in
Prezzies.
the Sunderland Shire of
Yeah,
Sydney.
Shire boy. Grew up a Shire boy.
Yep.
And just kind of steadily went to church there and sat in Sunday school. And there was a turning point came in the 1979 Billy Graham Crusade.
Wow, okay.
That's cool.
I went there along at Randwick Racecourse it was.
Okay.
There was a whole heap of people there and I went forward at that time and
How old were you then?
I was 15 at that time. Yep.
Very cool.
And went along at that time and and made a commitment there. And there was a guy there and he gave me a booklet and a little red booklet. I remember it now. It wasn't that big. It was only about that tall. Went home and kind of worked through that and that was pretty cool. And I had some Christian friends at the time as well and kind of talked it through with them and was like, we're into this kind of giving our lives to Jesus at the same time.
Wow, that's really cool.
Round about then. Yep.
That's cool.
And so, stayed on at Caringbah Prezzies for through to the end of school, and then got with a bunch of schoolmates and went to church with them at a different church where there were some pretty nice girls, and
Flirt to convert.
yeah, that's right, flirt to convert. Yeah, yep. And within about 6 months, all four of us were dating. But it was all about God. We were a pretty committed group and still are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more about what happened at Billy Graham.
So at Billy Graham, they gave this call after Billy had spoken, and I can barely remember him speaking. But they gave this call for people who were ready to make a commitment, and I was there with my mum. I think I was there with my sisters as well. I've got two sisters. And so I got up and you kind of went forward into this area, and there were a whole bunch of helpers that were obviously organised as part of the crusade, and and they were probably just the guy was probably a late teenager, early 20s, and you just sit down with them and they just kind of go through the basics of what you're believing and talk, a bit of an introduction to this little booklet. And you'd kind of do the first few pages together about who Jesus is and what it means to trust him. And, I can't even remember if we prayed together at that time. I'm not even sure that we did that. But it was just about, and he kind of really encouraged me. I was pretty excited about it and really encouraged me to go away and continue to work through the booklet and then talk to people at my church about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So your parents Christians?
My mum was always a Christian.
Yep.
Bless her, she's now gone to be with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And my father wasn't. So my parents divorced at a very young age. I was actually had my first 6 years in Melbourne.
Oh, wow.
Born a
Born in
Melbourne boy.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. And then my parents divorced, and my mum had been a Shire girl.
Okay.
And so when my parents divorced, my father stayed in Melbourne, and my two sisters and I came with mum up to live at Caringbah.
How did your mum and dad meet in the? Well, she's saying your mum was from the Shire, but then did they meet in Sydney or did they meet in Melbourne?
They did meet in Sydney. They had there were two. Their parents knew mutual friends, and so they were introduced through that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and that was in Sydney, but then they moved to Melbourne before they.
So they must have had a long distance kind of dating thing, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'm not even sure where they got married, but then they lived in Melbourne.
Why did they move to Melbourne?
I guess that was where my father was, and would have probably would have talked about it.
That's
And said,
just how
that was the choice.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah.
Did that shape you? Do you think, like your parents getting divorced pretty early?
Oh, yeah.
In terms of
it definitely did.
and also just
It
like
was
listening
tough.
to Jesus and stuff.
Yeah, it was tough growing
Mm.
up in a divorced family.
Do you feel like you're happy to share that?
Yeah, yep. So my parents had a good relationship still, and I remember my dad used to come up every now and then to our house at Sydney. And sometimes he'd come in and he'd have a meal. And I remember talking to the kids that I used to play with, neighbourhood kids, about this. And they'd be like, but your parents are divorced. Don't divorced parents yell at each other and they can't stand each other? And I'd be like, no, my mum and dad are, happy to sit down and talk about us and work through issues together. And I'd actually never seen them yell at each other or be violent or anything like that. So that was good.
Yeah.
And every school holidays, my sisters and I would, my mum would put us onto an aeroplane and we'd fly down to Melbourne, spend the school holidays with Dad, or a chunk of them, and then fly back and either go back to school or spend a bit of the school holidays with Mum here in Sydney. So
you said it's tough just not having your dad there all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just growing up without a father figure. I think it was probably tougher on me than it was on my sisters too. Yeah.
Your sister's older or younger?
One of each.
Okay.
One of
Okay.
each. So they both kind of had a mum to model on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't have that so much. I had an uncle who was a shy boy, and he kind of recognised that I was growing up without a father figure, and so he kind of took me under his wing. He had two sons, but they were about 5 years and 8 years younger than me.
Okay.
And so my uncle was pretty good about that. He kind of took me under his wing a bit, and he'd take me off and we'd do blokey things. And he ended up, he was the guy that ended up giving me a guitar and kind of taught me a bit to play the guitar. And that was kind of the start of my musical adventure.
Oh, right.
It was a funny story, actually. Every birthday that we had in the family, he would come round to our place and he would bring his guitar, and he would always then sing happy birthday for whoever was having the birthday.
Right.
And so this one birthday came, and Uncle Ken, his name was Ken, he came round and he had the guitar, and I thought, oh yeah, here's Ken, he's going to be here he's brought the guitar to sing happy birthday, and he said, happy birthday, John, and he gave me the guitar.
Oh, really?
That's really cool.
Whoa. And he and my mum had kind of worked through it.
Yeah.
And so Mum had bought herself a guitar, just kind of to be with me in the start, just in terms of learning, so I wasn't just struggling and I wasn't going to get nowhere and throw it away. And so Mum and I kind of both launched into lessons.
Oh, so she didn't have any a lot of musical
No,
ability? Yeah, okay.
She didn't.
Cool.
So we were both learning the guitar, but I very quickly accelerated away from her. And I think when she could see that I was grabbing it and running it and really enjoying it and doing a lot with it, she kind of backed off, and yeah, she felt it wasn't really, she wasn't learning as fast as I was.
It's probably a bit busier.
Yeah, probably running a family. Yeah.
How old were you at that time when you got the guitar?
How old was I? Oh,
Like what birthday, do you know?
Yeah. Oh, I'd be struggling to remember.
It's fascinating how you remember the giving of the guitar, but not what birthday that was.
Yeah. Probably around 13 or 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was your uncle a Christian as well?
No, he was not. He was
I was just wondering that if you said that your mum was a Christian all the time, but your dad probably wasn't.
Correct.
Do you think that played a part in terms of them separating?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, again, just reaching back into the early memories. I think she always classed herself as a believer, but I don't think she ever really got it before they were married.
Yeah.
And I know her parents didn't really get it either. But after she was divorced and we moved back to the Shire, she got a much better grasp on Christianity. And I'm not aware of the circumstances that led her to taking us all to Carringbar Presbyterian Church. But I think that's where the real growth for her would have really happened, and she would have recognised pretty quickly, I think, that she wasn't a believer before, and she recognised pretty quickly that her parents were not believers. And so it was probably partly through the trauma of the divorce, actually, that she turned to Christ. As a result, she kind of recognised that there was something more to life, and and Christ came in and moved in her life, and that's what I think. That's how we all wound up there at Carringbar Prezzies.
And are your sisters Christians?
They are very much
awesome.
So, very much so.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And our father's still not. Yeah. So Mum's gone to be with the Lord.
Yeah.
My father's still not, and my sisters and I, we pray for him very regularly, and he's led a pretty wild life, kind of smoked and drank for most of his life, and his health is not good. But my sisters and I, continue to be faithful signposts, just pointing the way to Jesus for him. And we just think perhaps the reason that he is living on and on is just God giving him a second chance and a third chance to come to Christ. And we just keep on praying that he will take that.
Yeah.
And as I say, just try and be faithful signposts, pointing it out to him. It's funny. Dad always says. He says, "I can see that you're a Christian, John, and this thing. I can see that it really works for you," is what he says.
Oh yeah, okay.
I can see it works for you, but he says, "I just don't believe it." He actually believes the gospel according to Kerry Packer. Remember Kerry Packer passed away, and he was actually dead for a bit.
Oh yes, and he said there's a light. He talked about the light, didn't he?
No. So he came back and he said,
no.
He famously said, "There is nothing there.
Yep.
I've been to the other side,
Yep.
and there's nothing there."
He's like, I've got good news and bad news, doesn't he? It's like, the good news is that I came back or something, and the bad news is there's nothing there at the end. Yeah.
There is absolutely nothing there. And my dad keeps quoting Kerry Packer, and I say, "Yep, the gospel according to Kerry Packer."
Big fan of Keza Packer, is he?
Yeah. Well, I think he's a big fan of anyone that supports his notion that it isn't real.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sad but true.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that how beautiful it is when you do notice the Holy Spirit working in someone's life. Like that idea of your mum actually, she was a believer, but she didn't get it. But there was a point where the Holy Spirit actually really moved in her, and she did get to that point where she got it. And I think something that we've been seeing on Chip Lunch for so many episodes now is often people will start with especially people who grew up in Christian families, will say things like, "Oh yeah, my story was pretty boring," but there was often moments.
This isn't a boring story.
Yeah, it's not a boring story at all. But in all cases, there's moments where the Holy Spirit goes, "Hey, this is where you're going." And it's really, really cool to see that in action in each other's lives. And so I just wanted to say this isn't boring. Like it's a really, really cool, really encouraging story thus far. Anyway,
thus far. It's going to be discouraging after this.
Beware the boring corner. The boring corner.
That's all right. So let's go back to your teenage years. Mm-hmm. You said that your mum started going to church.
Yeah.
Then so you're obviously going to church with your mum. And then you went to Billy Graham, one of the is it not the Crusades?
Yeah, it was Billy Graham Crusade. Randwick Racecourse.
I was worried about getting into the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And so you became a Christian around 15.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep. Right around 15.
So we always like to talk on Chip Lunch too about turning points. So we've talked about a few of them. Then what happens after that turning point? You said you decided to go to a different church with your friends. Was that after high school?
Yeah, that was after high school.
You said you were at Caringbah Presbyterian.
Caringbah all the way through school.
Yep. Okay. And then so how was it? I mean, 15, you're still at high school. How's it being a Christian in high school?
It was interesting because so at 15 I was actually at a local public school, Endeavour High School, down here at Caringbah.
Cool.
But then my parents had always been keen on me having a private education, so for years 11 and 12 I went to the Scots College over in Bellevue Hill.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how did that? I mean, surely that's a bit of a culture shock going from a public school to a private school to begin
Absolutely.
with.
Absolutely. It was a real culture shock for me.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult because by year 11, you've made all your friendships.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of pretty set. And here I was coming in as this new guy into all these different friendships, and it was really tough. But I was still definitely a believer there, and so interesting story. Once a fortnight, we had to go to chapel.
Okay,
it was just part of your timetable. It was like another class, and so I would go into chapel at Scots, and there was always this old guy that was the school chaplain, and he gave, between us girls, pretty boring, dry sermons, and I used to look at my fellow students carving swastikas in the backs of the pews.
Swastikas?
In the chapel at Scots College.
That's a bit wild.
And just putting graffiti on there.
Yeah.
And I'd look at this guy preaching these stale old sermons, and I would pray for my fellow students and think, my goodness, this is a golden opportunity for these guys to hear the gospel, and this guy is just preaching really stale old sermons that even as a believer I would struggle to focus on and follow along with. And I thought, wow, this is a huge opportunity lost. And so I guess I learned to understand that that Scots is a church school, but not necessarily a Christian school, where all the so none of the teachers, as far as I know, were Christian. It certainly wasn't a requirement that to teach at a school like Scots you had to be a Christian. And so I continued to go to Carringbar Prezzies on the Sunday evening, and that was one of the going to that church, and my faith in Christ was really one of the pillars that got me through those 2 years. They were tough years.
In terms of just not enjoying your friendships?
Yeah. Well, not having developed friendships at Scots,
which they would have developed maybe even from kindergarten.
That that's right. That's
Scots,
right. And I still had friends from Endeavour High, but we saw very little of each other. I kind of dropped out from that whole scene.
Especially because you're travelling so far as well for that.
Yeah, it was kind of an hour and a half on the train each way.
Yep.
And there was a real social scene on the train because there were a whole lot of other private kids from also doing the same train trip. So you'd all get to know each other, and there'd be, there's been some skylarking on the trains during such long trips.
Were you on those old Red Rattlers?
No, never the Red Rattlers.
Okay.
It was only ever the double deckers by the time.
Yeah, okay.
By the time I was there, but there'd be
I've heard stories from my mum and dad about the Red Rattlers that you could just open the doors, and basically while it was travelling, you just open it and just hang out the side and do all that kind of stuff.
It was the same with the ones we had. Yep. And in fact, you could open the doors, and there were some handles above the doors, and some guys would, not me, but some these people I know, would jump up and grab onto the handles, so they're dangling there, and then they'd kick their legs out between poles. You'd look at the way they're going.
Yeah, I know, right.
Pass the pole and kick.
Are
your
they
legs
doing that
out.
in the tunnels?
No, I never saw them do it in the tunnels.
Yeah, I was going to say that'd be even scary.
They do it between poles. There was one tunnel event where one of the guys, the doors closed on his bag, so his bag was outside the train and he was inside.
Oh no!
For I think that was between King's Cross and Edgecliff.
Yep.
And so the bag was outside, and I think he didn't make it in, and I was on the inside, so I was holding onto the handles of his bag. And he said, "I'll see you at King's Cross." He kind of ran along beside the train and said, "I'll see you at King's Cross."
So he didn't even get on the train.
He didn't even get on the train.
Oh, and
how
you
does his
just
bag on the
bag.
train?
Yeah. I think he kind of shoved his bag and realised the door had closed, and I kind of grabbed his bag and So his bag stayed outside with me holding onto it between Edgecliff and King's Cross.
That's amazing.
And then I jumped off, and the next train he came along, and there he was.
That's so good.
Oh, that's good on you for doing that.
Well done.
Yep.
That's a funny story.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've never had a bag get stuck outside a train before. No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so you're finishing high school, right?
Yeah.
What is there? Would you have a plan after that? I'm guessing the music is going to play a part.
Well, the music, I actually didn't do a lot of music when I was at Scots. And then when I finished school, I'd studied hard and I'd enjoyed, so I should say, the school, the study, the academic side of it had been a real struggle for me. I did pretty well, but I wasn't a happy studier. And
you didn't enjoy just studying night and day? Yeah,
just slugging away at it. And so when I finished school, I actually applied to go to uni. I applied to do electrical engineering at USyd, and I also applied at Qantas to get an apprenticeship as an avionics guy.
Okay.
Cool.
As an avionics apprentice. And I got accepted into the two of them.
Oh.
As I say, it had been a slug doing all that study, so I thought, do I go straight into more study and more slug? And I didn't really feel up to it, and so I took the apprenticeship with Qantas. So
what is it? Sorry, avionics?
Avionics. So it's really electrical, radio, and instrument.
Wow.
Avionics.
Right.
Electrical, radio, and instrument for aeroplanes. So I'd long had an interest in aeroplanes.
Yep.
Sick.
And an interest in electronics. So I thought, how can I combine the two of them? And did a bit of career research and found that you could become like an aircraft mechanic, an electrical one.
Very cool.
So I thought, that could work. And at the same time, just to keep my options open, as I applied to uni to do an electrical engineering degree. So I had the luxury of being able to choose between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you still work at Qantas, right? Have you been there ever since?
No, I've not.
Okay.
I've not.
Well, that's a long stretch to be at the same place.
Yeah.
Tell us more about. Hey, I'm going to get this wrong again.
Avionics.
Avionics.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Tell us more about that. What did that mean for you when you got into it?
So that meant I was working at Qantas pretty much. In the start, I think it was 3 days a week, and I was doing TAFE 2 days a week.
Okay.
Yep. And then TAFE backed off down to 1 day a week for the rest of the apprenticeship. So the rest of the time you're on the tools, kind of working on 747s and 767s, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Where's that at in Sydney?
Yeah, in Mascot.
In Mascot?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Which is right near where the airport is. Yep.
Yeah. So that was really good. But by the time I got to the end of it, I mean, the compared to the study load I'd had for the HSC and compared to, I think, a university degree, the TAFE course, I kind of cruised through that. It was pretty easy. And I thought, I'm kind of ready to do more and ready to get back into study. And so I then applied at Qantas to obtain a traineeship, where they would then pay to put me through uni, essentially through an electrical engineering degree. Because I knew that I'd got in at UCED when I'd finished school, so I knew it was very likely that I would get back in again.
Yep.
So that's what I did. I applied at Qantas to be taken on as an electrical engineering trainee, and by that time, I had my TAFE certificate, and I'd completed the apprenticeship, and so they then took me on as a trainee, and so then I had this really cool situation where I would spend 6 months working full time at Qantas, and then 6 months full time at the University of Technology here in Sydney.
There you go.
That sounds pretty cool.
That's a great way.
And they would pay me all year. Pay me full-time.
You got your full-time salary.
That's the life.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's great.
Yeah. So I did that.
So what was the key moment of that time in your life, do you think? Like, or that decision, maybe the decision was the key moment of your life. You were stoked with your decision.
Yeah. So having got to the end, as I say, TAFE wasn't that challenging, and I got to the end and thought there must be more to education than this. And that was when I looked around and found that there were in fact degreed engineers that work at Qantas at a higher level than the work that I was doing on the aeroplane. Their design work and approval work, all that kind of stuff, and that was when I decided, that was my turning point. I decided, that's really what I want to do. That's really what I want to do. And so I actually went and applied, and when I originally applied, there were no positions. But I said to the manager, look, I actually started uni part-time once I'd finished the apprenticeship, and I was just working as a mechanic, as an electrical mechanic. I started uni in the evenings, and I went and saw the manager of the department I wanted to be in, and I would bug him twice a month.
Yep.
I would phone him on one occasion, and then 2 weeks later I'd go up and knock on his door, and I'd say, I want an electrical traineeship. Let me know when you've got one coming. And he didn't. He was open to my advancing, and he said, look, we'll see what we can do. And so I kept that up for about 12 months. And so by the time they actually had approved the position, he and I knew each other well, and he knew that I was very keen. And there were other people that applied because it was a pretty lucrative opportunity, as you can understand, for the company paying you effectively full time to go to university. But he knew who I was, knew I was very keen, and so it was a bit of a no-brainer.
That's cool.
He accepted me into the position, so that was definitely a turning point, certainly in my career.
That's cool. And what about in terms of your Christian walk at this time?
Yeah, so during that time, I continued with my other three mates. So there were four of us at Sylvania Anglican Church.
Okay.
And
another church in the Shire.
Another good old Shire church. And the four of us, we really grew in our ministries and in our understanding of the gospel under the teaching at Sylvania. And Sylvania had a pretty hard time. They kind of had a bit of a church split that went on.
Okay.
And the four of us kind of stuck with church. And
just so when you say church split, some people decided to leave.
There was a Pentecostal group that decided to up and move off.
Just had theological differences.
Yep, theological differences, And that was a really interesting time also of getting my head into God's word and trying to understand, well, what are these people saying, and does it really align with the Bible? And so it really, that experience helped me greatly, just in terms of reading the Bible for myself, and not necessarily just believing what other people tell me about it, but recognizing that I should, to be a real Christian, I really needed to really get into the Bible myself, not just rely on the teachings that other people have given me. And so I really wrestled with a lot of the stuff that these Pentecostals had said was going on, and really tried to understand, what's going on there. There was a whole lot of talk about, the gifts and speaking in tongues and all that kind of thing. Really understanding, how does this really fit in with what I've had understood about Christianity up to then.
It's quite fascinating the way that, Ethan, you already talked about it just before, about the Holy Spirit moves. It's interesting how he's used some difficult times of your life, John, to be able to help you to grow. So like it's obviously with your parents' divorce, and this situation in terms of when you were at this church, it's like that. I love the way that God decides to experience, give us some suffering, give us some difficult times in order that we grow in the knowledge and of His love.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating. That's what you're saying.
It's so often that God makes us stop and think through stuff like that. Particularly that moment, it was just like, well, what are all these people doing? Oh, well, I need to actually stop and read my Bible. And that's what I've learned to do. It's really cool that was the thing you learned out of all of that, because that's a huge thing that the Spirit does. It's just
Also encouraging that when you were like, there's a disagreement going on, one of your original first thing to go to was the Bible, right?
Yeah,
Rather than I find that really encouraging, because I think that's it's a helpful way to look at if there are any disagreements with church or even outside of church. It's like, well, what does the Bible say? What does God's word say first, before we start putting anything on top of it that's going to perhaps change our perspective or change how we're trying to love people or work together with people. That was really cool.
Yeah, and that was definitely a crisis point. That was really difficult, because there were a lot of people that were kind of part of my church family that were then saying, no, we're up and we're going to go off in this direction. Yeah. And I'd be like, well, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that direction. So, and it was definitely a struggle. It was definitely a difficult time.
It also shows though you were really quite strong in your identity, like with Jesus too, because it's like, even if we lose, there's a very annoying fly buzzing around us. Even if it was going to cause issues, and sadly your relationships were going to be probably damaged by these, a certain group leaving.
Absolutely.
That you were saying, no, I'm more like within Jesus' stronghold. Not Jesus' stronghold, that's not the right word. My relationship with Jesus is more important than my relationships with people, no matter how hard that is. That's what's really hard about it, I think. Yep. Because you called it a crisis point.
Yeah, it was absolutely a crisis point, and a huge growth time for me. I remember really, really struggling with that time, really in tears sometimes with God about, what's going on here. Is this really the right thing to do?
Is it mainly because you're going to lose friends?
Yeah, I was going to lose friends. There was kind of a break in relationships, and it was a real, it had been a great group before that, and it clearly split. So there were a lot of close friends that I was no longer fellowshipping with.
Yeah, it would be really hard.
I think it's really cool though, hearing your response to that being one that's really biblical. We at Soli's have our training thing, and it's called we call it Berea, because of Acts 17, and like that is what the Bereans do in Acts 17. It says here that I just pulled it up before. Paul and Silas make their way to Berea, and on arriving there, they went to the Jewish synagogue. And then verse 11, now the Berean Jews were of more noble character than those in Thessalonica, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. And as a result, many of them believed. It was really cool that you're able to, like, you were faced with this challenge of do I actually believe what is being told to me? And the response is, to actually examine the scriptures and figure that out for yourself.
Yeah,
and,
and a key part of that also was my friends, because I would get with them and we would examine the scriptures together. And
awesome.
I found that enormously helpful.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Far more helpful than me just reading the scriptures on my own.
Yeah.
Was getting with them, because they'd been reading other bits, and we'd get together and kind of compare notes, and we really wrestled with it.
And you test each other.
And those times together were really key times during that period for me. My time with my friends, where we'd talk about this kind of stuff and try and encourage each other to get it straight in our minds, and we'd even spend time praying about it. Yeah.
That's really encouraging.
And that again comes back to stuff like in Hebrews, where it's saying that that when you're going through hard stuff, don't give up meeting together. It's like you guys all could have gone, well, this is all hard. We're actually just going to tap out now. But instead, you guys gathered together and read the Word of God and examined the Scriptures together. And that's a really important thing to do as Christians. That as we face stuff like that, it's your response is exactly what we should be doing, which is turning to the Bible and doing that together rather than splitting off and figuring it out on their own. And
what was the outcome of that time?
Yeah.
Obviously, some people left the church.
Yeah, and it was a huge again. It was a huge time of personal growth. And a whole lot of people left the church, and so the church was a whole lot smaller. But we could see that those that remained, there was real commitment among them. There was certainly the outcome was in significant strengthening of the church.
Oh, that's interesting.
A significant drop in numbers, but those that remained knew what they believed and why they were still there and why they believed.
And that's going back to like God puts us through difficult times in order to us to draw closer to Him.
Yeah,
and it sounds like that's what happened in that situation.
Yeah.
So, what age were you then?
So that was it was after school. So I would have been around 19.
Wow, that's a very formative time.
That is huge
to really push you to that growth.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, and it is interesting looking back on it. Even just talking with you guys can help me to see that every time, as you said, Ethan, they were crisis points.
Yeah.
Every time they weren't easy. They were difficult times. Every time. That was where the growth was.
Yes, where we grow, right?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes that I have this sort of I don't want God to put me through suffering. But then sometimes now, as I become a bit more mature in my faith, sometimes oh man, this is hard, but I know I'm going to grow from this. And sometimes I'm a little bit excited about it because I'm it's hard, but I know that at the end of this, there's something really good.
Yeah.
Really good. And to know that I'm growing closer to the Father. It's well, I could probably do this, you know what I mean? And we always have the hope that God gives us through Jesus too.
Yeah.
We know that it will end. At some point it's going to end. To suffer sometimes, and I don't want to minimize anyone's suffering either, but sometimes I'm there'll be a lesson here, and you never know what it is either. Yeah. And then you look back at it like we are now sometimes, and you're like, oh, that was what it was. God did not answer my prayer in any way that I wanted Him to, but He still answered the prayer, but in a different way.
So what's become my favourite verse over the years is directly related to this subject is Romans 8:28.
Awesome.
And we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, for those who are called. Yeah. And it'd just be yep, I'm going through this suffering, but it's not the good things. It's not just the good things that work out for good. It's the bad things that work out for good. And so I know that God is going to bring good out of this suffering. And so, that certainly it certainly makes it bearable. Yeah.
So going through that thing at your own church would have been difficult for sure. But then you're also kind of growing in your career. What's the kind of next point in your life, do you think, a turning point? We keep going to the turning point. So I don't want to, hopefully don't go to a crisis point straight away, but where did you see yourself after that?
Well, I just kind of slugged on once I'd obtained this position as a trainee, and I was spending 6 months at uni and 6 months at work, and I did that kept that up for 6 years, and so let's see, if I finished school when I was 17. So I'm 4 years on. I know it's actually 5 years on. So I was 23 when I started that. No, that can't be right.
22?
It must have been about 22 when I started that. So finished it, when I was No. Anyway, finished it somewhere when I was around about 27.
Yep. Okay.
And about 2.5 years through uni was where I met my wife.
Okay. Was that at church?
No, it was not. It was at a Christian. I'm seeing a Christian band at the Salvo's place on West Botany Street at Rockdale.
Who were you seeing? Who's the band?
I can't remember. She and I have talked about it since. And I bought their tape actually. It was a pretty good tape, and I remember I'd played it.
Oh, you're dating yourself there. You bought the tape.
Yep. Played it and played it, and
awesome.
Neither of us can remember the band.
Oh, really?
I met her on that evening, and so I remember I was in second year uni at that time.
Do you know what year it was?
I do. It was May 1990.
Wow.
Yeah, May 1990.
Yeah, there's a lot of Priority Paid, and there was a lot of Sydney Christian bands and stuff going around then.
There were. And I was actually in one of those Sydney Christian
Really?
bands.
Oh, here we
That's
go.
very-
Here's
here
a
we
story.
go.
Let's go. What band were you in?
So I was in a band called Soul Purpose.
Awesome.
Oh, Soul Purpose.
Yep,
Okay.
Soul Purpose. And we played down at the Rock, and we played with Priority Paid. And
Awesome.
we played with a whole heap of bands of that time. The coffee shop era was there were a lot of Christian bands around.
Yeah.
So what's the coffee shop era? Is that you played at a whole lot of coffee shops? and
Yeah,
bands?
yep. You'd go along to what would essentially be a larger venue that would be able to take a crowd, and they would also serve coffee type stuff. They wouldn't serve any alcohol, and so it was really just an opportunity for Christians to go to and non-Christians could happily go, but they could go to a venue where there wasn't going to be alcohol, so that there wasn't going to be violence, and they could meet other like-minded people, very likely Christians.
Yeah.
So tell us about the formation of this band, though.
Yeah.
So you obviously you play bass at church.
I
Or
do
you
play
guitar?
bass at church. Yep.
Yeah, but you play guitar or bass.
So I started playing guitar, and actually I was in a band at school that had there was another guitarist and I. So there were two guitarists and a singer and a drummer.
What covers are you playing then? Because that's what you do, right? When you
We were
first start
playing the Sex Pistols.
Oh, right.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's cool.
That's so
Yeah,
good.
that was great.
Yep.
Yep. And the other guitarist was really good. And so I was kind of demoted to bass.
No. That's often what happens, isn't it?
Yeah. And we were in year 10 at the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Had actually we're probably more like in year 9 at school. So it was before it was before the Scots period. And we didn't even have enough money to buy a bass guitar, and so we actually passed a hat around with all of us in the band kind of chipped in and bought this bass guitar. And
That's cool.
So cool.
So there I was playing the bass guitar
Sick.
in this 4-piece band, and so we played in talent quests at school.
Yep.
And we were pretty popular actually.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So just Sex Pistols or anything else?
We played some Angels as well.
Yeah, and that's a very
and
popular.
some Radiators.
Very cool.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then
That's awesome. That is so good.
is that what became Soul Purpose, or is that a different band?
No, it was the same drummer.
Mm-hmm.
So the same drummer. The other guitarist and the singer, they were not believers at school, and so after school we kind of kept in touch, but they weren't interested in the Christian band thing. But the drummer and I were at Sylvania Anglican together, and we were we'd seen all these other bands playing and thought, we could be fun to start up a Christian band in this coffee shop scene. And so we kind of put our feelers out and got with another guitarist who was also a singer and then a keyboard player.
That is the best.
And we formed this 4-piece band.
And you played Sex Pistols?
Sex Pistols at Christian coffee shops.
yeah.
That's right.
That
would be pretty funny.
So good.
That would have been wild. Yep.
Did you have any songwriting duties, or you were just the bass guy?
No, I didn't have any songwriting duties. I was just a bass guy.
Yeah.
Yep. And backup singer.
Oh, nice.
Solid.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Yep.
So you had a keyboardist, a guitarist, the bassist, and the drummer.
Yep.
So 4-piece. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
4-piece.
Sick.
So, how many shows did you play at Soul
is
Purpose?
Yeah, so
It's great fun.
This is awesome.
we did have great fun. Yeah, we played a whole heap of shows
Awesome.
over a period of we were probably together for about 3 years, maybe 4 years. Yeah. We had T-shirts made. We had a big backdrop.
Do you have any of it?
We had groupies.
Oh, yes.
What, Christian groupie?
Christian groupies.
Yeah.
Which are all your girlfriends, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Solid.
Our girlfriends.
Yeah.
Do you still have any of the merch?
I think I do. Yeah, I still have a Soul Purpose T-shirt actually.
That is so
we need you a
good.
photo, and
Yeah.
we'll get Dave to
We'll get Dave
edit
to
that
put it
in.
in.
That'd
Yeah.
be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
He's not here. I was like, he's
No, he's over there. He gave me a thumbs up.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, Soul Purpose, man. So what did you get from that time?
Yeah.
I'd be really stoked to hear what you thought.
Yeah, so we spent a whole lot of time praying about the ministry, and we would often talk about Jesus as part of the concert, and kind of have a bit of an altar call. Being a band, you didn't go into a lot of detail with that kind of thing, but we made sure that we were available for that kind of thing because people that come along to a band like to go and talk to the band, and when they did, that would be the opportunity for us to talk to them about Jesus. And so we were definitely outreach focused, and we were definitely every band practice. I remember at the end of every band practice, with ears ringing, the four of us would gather in a group and earnestly pray for people that they would.
That's cool.
They would come to know Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
What would you describe your sound as in Soul Purpose?
What would I describe our sound? It did have a fairly significant keyboard influence. There was a fair bit of keyboard, and it wasn't a real grunge, guitar-y sound. There wasn't any heavy guitar.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty solid rhythm section. Yeah. So I don't know, likening it to other
Christian
bands.
version of. Which is
Christian
always
version
a
of-
silly way to do it, but Christian version of what
Christian
band?
version of maybe Duran Duran.
Okay.
Sick. Yeah.
Oh.
That's heaps of fun.
So if you turn hungry like
Hungry
a
like the
wolf,
wolf. Yeah, that's
turn
right.
into a Christian song.
Girls on film.
Yeah, right. That's pretty cool. I always wished I was in a band.
It was a lot of fun.
I have zero musical talent,
Oh, really?
but yeah.
I tried to learn the bass. I don't have any rhythm at all. It's really bad, actually.
Probably find you need some for the bass.
Yeah. Well,
I have rhythm. That's the thing.
Yeah.
My favorite people in bands are the front men.
Yeah.
So maybe I could
See,
be a front man.
my favorite person in a band is more often than not the bassist. They're my favorite person to watch on stage because they're very regularly just in their own world, just absolutely
That's true.
loving life.
That's true.
It's really cool to watch.
Was that you?
Yeah. Down the back
Yes.
there, not necessarily in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Although singing, I kind of had to be up
Yeah,
a
fair
fair
enough.
bit up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was a real dancer. Actually, the guitarist and I, we were just always moving.
Like
That's
I
mad.
love
Absolutely
that.
on the
It's
move.
so good.
Yeah, that's cool.
And again, that was kind of modelled a bit on a lot of the '80s bands that you saw.
Yeah, they do like to move it. Like
Yeah,
it's
there's a
a
whole
kind
lot
of
of
strange way of moving around on stage.
Yeah,
But yeah.
just kind of keep moving. Yeah.
I love.
Feel free to play some music videos.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd be epic.
Well, this just has got me thinking about live music because I only like bands that I've found that there's a pattern that I have. The bands that I really like do like an amazing live show. Like there's bands that can play an album but then they're live and they're like but like when they go live they're like it's an extra amazing experience. One of my favorite examples is a band called The Hives. They're like a Swedish rock and roll band, and their music sounds pretty similar, but when you go and see them on stage, it's a serious experience. Like they're so good at getting the crowd involved and that kind of stuff. So that's what you got me thinking of. But
yeah, and I think there's definitely an element to that. When you go, it's not just the music. You're not just their music. You got to be visually entertaining too. You know, we used to. A bit like there was an old band, the Bay City Rollers, who used to do a bunch of the guitar moves.
Yeah.
So we used to practice the guitar moves and do a whole bunch of them
That's
as
great.
well.
Yeah.
I wish we
So
had
that was a
footage
real
of this.
I wish there was footage of this.
We
That'd be
need
so
footage.
good.
But even they're like the glam metal bands and stuff, they were all like that too, right?
Yeah. And we'd be dressed in pretty glary shirts.
Yeah.
And the white sneakers, black pants with the really white sneakers. And every set we'd change shirts. So, people made comments about, wow, someone doing all your washing must be pretty busy.
Getting so sweaty.
So it was the whole experience. Made sure there was a good light show, all that kind of thing.
That's heaps good. What's the best show you reckon you guys ever did?
We did one up at there was a church up at Northbridge that we did, they had a really good crowd. It was interesting actually. As soon as a church would book you, they a lot of them just assumed that a crowd would turn up.
Oh,
And so you'd get there and there'd be hardly anyone. And so we actually learned that when people would book us, we'd say, right, you're going to have to put a bit of work into this. You're going to have to advertise it, get the name out, do as much advertising as you can to try and get a crowd along. And this crowd at Northbridge Church, they'd done a great job of packing their church hall out.
Awesome.
And we got there and the place was, we played and it was just packed and they really enjoyed us. And they were dancing a lot, and there were so many people there that they actually started crowd diving. People would come up onto the crowd and they'd just dive off, and then they'd kind of hand these people back through the crowd and drop them down, and someone else would go up and they'd do the crowd thing. They were just having a great time, and in fact, they were having such a great time that when we finished our second set, they kept going.
They kept you didn't get.
We're like, were they really here for us, or were they here for the crowd diving?
Yes, that's the best.
You added to the experience.
Of course.
That's right. Yeah, they were great to play in front of. And just to see how much they were really enjoying it, and they took it to the next level with the crowd diving.
That's the best.
So what brought about the demise of Soul Purpose?
Was there a hard breakup?
No, there wasn't
musical
a hard
differences?
breakup. like the Beatles.
Yeah.
No, there was
I
nothing
like it how you
that.
related yourself straight to one of the greatest bands of all time. It's good.
Well, of course.
Yeah, you got to aim high.
Yeah.
What is it? Shoot for the moon and is it shoot for the stars and you hit the moon?
Yeah, that's right. That whole 80s coffee scene thing it just collapsed pretty quickly actually. Kind of abound, you've heard of the Rock down at Cronulla.
Yep.
Where is the Rock?
We'd played there. It was at the Elephant House.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which, for those of you who don't know what the Elephant House is, check out our Cronulla gathering when we're back in person. It's actually at that church.
At Cronulla Anglican.
Cronulla Anglican.
Yeah, and where we do church is right where the Rock was.
Yeah.
It was right in that hall.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's a big stage there, and it was pretty wild. My wife and I went down to the service down there before lockdown, and walked in there. And I was like, wow, that was the first time I'd been in there since playing there at the Rock, and I was like, look at this place. It's just the way it was back then.
That's cool.
It was pretty interesting to see. Yeah, see that. Yeah, not much had changed. So
those old Odeons.
That's right.
The music venues.
Yep. So that whole scene, it just collapsed pretty quickly. And it's funny you ask, because I kind of think back and I really don't know what the instigator was for why it all collapsed. It was, it must have been, right in the late 80s there. Right, 88, 89, 90 was, it all just collapsed pretty quickly. And we were, I guess we all kind of moved on. Yeah.
Grunge took over.
Yeah, the grunge of the 90s took over. And the rest was history. Yeah. We were too clean cut for grunge.
That's Soul Revival started right in the middle of the grunge era back in 1992, I think. 91, 92.
You won't see much grunge doing guitar dance moves.
Yeah, that's
or having bright shirts. And white sneakers.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, so you've finished up with the Soul Purpose. What are you doing next? You're still working at Qantas at the same time?
Yeah, I was still working at Qantas and I was still dating my now wife. So
I always get her name wrong. How do you pronounce it?
Deirdre.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
So she and I were dating all the way while I was at university. And we figured out after a couple of years that this was the real deal and we were going to get married. But my job and getting through uni was a full-time slog. And so I kind of made it clear early that I needed to get through that before I had time for a marriage. And she was all right with that. And so, and it was university was a real slog. And in fact, I couldn't do a full load in the 6 months that I was at university. You really couldn't get through, and there was no one that actually did that. And so what you would do is take about a 3/4 load for that time, and then take a quarter load in the evening when I was working.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so I used to, a typical day is I'd be up at 6:30 and I'd go to work in the office at Qantas, and then I'd finish and I'd have a class that would go from 5:30 to 8:30 in a town, and then after that I would drive home, and then typically hit the books till about 1, and get between 12:30 and 1 and go to bed, and wake up at 6:30 and do it all again the next day.
Yeah, it's a big day, big
huge.
days.
Yeah, so they were huge days, and I would get to the weekend and just collapse in a
Do you
heap.
drink a lot of coffee?
No. I did drink coffee, but not to excess. In fact, I used to go home, leave home at 8:30 and kind of hit the books about 9:30. I used to have a coffee at about 11:30, and that would get me
That'd
through.
do it,
That would
yeah.
get me through to 1. But I
Yeah.
had no problem sleeping.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. And I look back on it now and think, wow, coffee at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you got married after that, though?
So I got married after that. Yeah, finished. Yeah, graduated.
Yep.
And got married, and and so we stayed. My wife came over. She Dee had been. She grew up at Lugano Anglican.
Mm-hmm. Not in
And-
the Sutherland Shire.
Yeah, so she was an import.
We imported her, even though you were an import from
that's
Melbourne.
right. In fact, yeah, she was my first girlfriend outside of the Shire.
Wild.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it was a big deal for me.
That
Yeah,
is
it's a big
huge.
deal.
Yeah. And so she was an import, but she saw the light, saw the way of the Shire, and was happy to come in.
I just love it. It's just like you sound like hobbits every time.
We do.
Come back
We
to
really
the
do.
Shire.
Yep. It's the best.
The Insular Peninsula.
I haven't heard it called that.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
That's awful. I just don't like it how
Peninsula.
people like that. I know you're only joking, sorry. But
Yeah.
anyway, sorry.
I'm
I'm guessing this is it's not a crisis point, but it's probably a turning point when
No,
you get married,
yeah,
isn't it?
definitely a turning
Yeah.
point. Yeah, yep. So we got married in March of 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, she came along to my graduation, which was in April 1994, a month later. And then we rented at Engadine for 6 months while we were still going to Sylvania Anglican Church. And because we kind of thought, Engadine might be a pretty cool place to live. And it was a good place to live, but the problem is it was just a bit too far away from most of our friends, which were kind of scattered between Sylvania and Cronulla. And so we ended up buying it at South Kirrawee, bought a house there.
Nice.
Yep. And that was where we started a family.
Yeah. How many kids you've got?
So we have 3 girls. So we had 3 girls. And the first one was in, we had it while we were living there at South Kirrawee.
What's her name?
Laura.
Yep.
And then not long after that, there was another crisis point. So while I'd been working for Qantas, I was doing a whole lot of work with a company up in the Pacific Northwest of the US.
So that's a Seattle kind
in
of
the
area,
Seattle
isn't it?
area. Yep. About an hour's drive north of Seattle. That was I was actually flying up there for work 2 or 3 times every year for about 3 years. And so that company got to know me very well, and I got to know them in the area. And every time I was up there, they said, we could really do with a guy like you up here. And for most of the time, I was just like, no, I'm all good. But I would talk to Dee about it, and eventually there was a bit of the loosening of the soil around the roots I put down at Qantas, and I thought, perhaps this would be a good opportunity to go up there. And so I went up for one work trip, and by that time we'd had Laura, and I actually took Dee and Laura with me, and this gave them an opportunity to see what the area's like and to meet people in the company, and we did some praying about it and decided, this would be a pretty good opportunity and it's the right time of life. Why don't I quit Qantas and we move up to Seattle.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Washington State. So we did that.
Wow.
So
That's
how-
cool.
How long are you
married.
living there for?
So we lived up there for 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you find a church there? And
We did, found a really good church there. Yeah, we had some contacts back here that knew about a bunch of churches up there. And we found a really good church up there. We ended up going to a Baptist church, which was really good. Shout out to the Baptists. Yeah, loved the Baptist, our time with the Baptist up there.
Yes.
Because the Anglican church in the US is a bit odd.
yeah, it's very different.
It's
Episcopalian.
Episcopalian, yep.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
A little bit different to what
Yeah.
we're used to here.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we went. So we had, getting back to our kids. So we had Laura here, and then we had Bethany. She was born in the US, and then Kayla, 13 months after her. So we had 3 girls in pretty close succession. But the younger 2 are Americans,
Yeah,
and the
it would.
oldest
Very
one
cool.
is Australian.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, do they have dual citizenship now?
The younger two do, yes, yes. So they had, because they were born there, they got American
Get it,
birth
yeah.
certificates. And then we had them declared, we applied at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. to have them declared Australians born abroad based on the fact that their parents were Australian.
Yep.
And on that basis, they were issued with the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. issued them with Australian citizenship certificates.
Great.
So the two
Very
of them
cool.
have got US birth certificates and Australian citizenship certificates.
Very cool.
There you go.
So they're Julies.
There you go.
So that Julie's. What? Again, it's another turning point / crisis point. Whatever you want to,
huge.
whatever you want to put it.
And that was a significant one too.
Yeah.
It was
That's very different to moving to Scots College and not having any friends. That's like
it
That's
was
a
a little
whole
bit.
other
Yeah,
ballgame.
yeah. It was difficult settling in up
Yeah.
there too. It was really difficult.
Especially when you have like no roots, like you
Yeah,
say.
that's right. That's right. We had one distant contact, which was a family that were quite helpful. But we really struggled at first. And we ended up, God was very gracious in leading us to the church he led us to. We'd been along to a few other churches. And then we went along to this one church. It was Northwest Baptist Church. And as soon as we walked in, we were talking to the minister on the way in. And he could hear from our accent straight away that we were different. And he said, what have you guys been up to? And we said, we've just recently moved up here from Australia. And he said, oh wow. He said, you guys must be finding that really difficult. And Dee actually teared up at that comment and just said, it's pretty lonely. Well, I had friends from work, but it was especially hard on her because she didn't have that work contact. And she teared up, and the two of us got to talking to that minister, pastor as they're known up there, after the service, and he said, "Look, I want you guys to come back to our place for lunch." And in fact, his wife had set 2 extra places at their dinner table that morning before they left for church, and she said, "I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm just setting." She wasn't something she did regularly. She said, "I'm just setting 2 extra places when I kind of put the meal on," and it was like, wow, those two extra places were for us. And
I'm sensing the theme here, like we're talking about with the Spirit moving in different ways.
Yep. And so that was a really great welcome. We went to the pastor's place for lunch, spent all afternoon there, and really felt loved. And so over the next couple of weeks, we went to this church, and it was only within the next couple of weeks that one of the times they said, after they'd done the first song or two, they said, "Look, stand up and turn around and talk with someone that you're nearby and greet someone." And so we stood up and turned around, and there was this couple there. And by this time, we'd been looking at houses to buy up there, and we got interested in this one house, but we hadn't yet bought it. And we got chatting with this couple. Their names were Rob and Sandy, and they said, "Oh, what have you guys been up to?" And we said, "Oh, we're just we're kind of new in the area, and we've been thinking about buying a house." And they said, "Oh yeah, have you seen anything you like?" And we said, "Oh yeah, we've seen this one at in North Heather Place." And they said, "Oh yeah, that's right next door to us. We think you should buy it."
What?
And we were just like,
That is amazing.
yeah, it was absolutely amazing. So we ended up buying that place, and he and I ended up becoming prayer partners.
Wow. That's really cool.
He's a real, and I to this day, I still pray for him every day. So once a week, we would drive down to the local coffee shop in the morning before work, and we would spend time sharing with each other and reading the Bible and praying.
That's beautiful.
And we just look back on that time, we're just like, wow, God just carried us so much. And we made, so having struggled when we first went over there, we made such good friends through that church. And we had this, going over there, we had this 2 to 5 year plan. And we said, if we really hate it, we've got to stick out for 2 years just to kind of settle in and make our mind up if it's not for us. But the idea is that we think we'll go home after we've been there for around about 5 years. Well, we hadn't been there for 12 months. and Deirdre, she tossed her hat in the ring and she said, "This is so good here, I could stay forever."
Wow.
She really loved it. We made some really great friends. By this time, Laura was going to a local Christian school that had a really good culture. They were really friendly.
So
we loved
cool.
our church. She'd got in with a mums group, a mothers of preschoolers group. They called them MOPS, and made a whole lot of really good friends there.
Yep.
And we just really clicked with the American people. They were just so warm and friendly.
Yeah.
We just thought, wow, this is, we really enjoyed our time there.
But so Dee said that she could stay there forever, but clearly you didn't, because you're back here.
There was another crisis. There was yet another turning point.
How did you? It'd be cool to hear about how you came back to Australia, but then also how you ended up at Soul Revival Church.
Yeah, so briefly we kind of roared through our 5 years, and we were like, what's going on here? We said that we'd only be here 2 to 5 years, and we've kind of roared through 5 years and just really enjoying it. What's going on? And so we started praying about it, and very shortly after that I got a new boss at work, and I butted heads with this boss. He and I did not get on. And so that again was kind of a loosening of the soil. And pardon me, before long, I was coming home pretty early. And before that, I'd been working pretty long days. And Dee'd be like, I'm early today. What's going on here? And I'd be like, I can't stand it in there. I just can't get out of there fast enough. And we realised that, that work was uncomfortable for me. And it was kind of a little bit before that we'd had this key conversation, and we said, right, we had this 2 to 5 year plan to be in the US, and we've roared through 5 years. What are we doing here? And so we said, look, where did we want to grow old and the twilight years of our life? And we said, could that be in the US where we were, or did we want it to be in Australia? And we kind of talked the two through and decided it was definitely Australia, because that's where we were at heart. That's where both of our extended families were. So we definitely wanted to grow old in Australia. And so the questions got easier from there. The next question was, okay, do we want to grow old on the other side of the planet from our children and our grandchildren? The obvious answer is no. And we realised then, right, we really need to go home before our kids become American.
Yeah.
Right.
Because by that time, they sounded as American as apple pie.
Oh, yeah.
They sounded like, it was like something out of Sesame Street when I come home from work. They were so American. And it was around about that time that I got the new boss, and things went pear-shaped for me at work, and we were like, wow, this is just a sign. We've got to do this. And so we turned our heads for home. And I let it be known amongst certain circles at Qantas that we were ready to come back. I didn't yell it from the rooftops. I just, that if there was a position that opened up, and there wasn't for a while, and so we were praying about it, and we really weren't sure where this was headed. But the right position opened up, and they invited me to apply. And the rest was history. I had the right experience and the right qualifications, and was the right fit. I'd had different experience outside the company, so I was able to bring a wider perspective back to the area that I returned to. And so we went back, and we moved back into our old house, and I moved back into the same floor on my old building at Qantas.
Oh wow!
We were like, wow, did we ever actually go?
Yeah.
It was like, was that just a 6-year American dream?
That's amazing.
Yeah, although we pretty quickly outgrew the house, and so we realised we needed to get a bigger house.
Sure.
And we actually wound up back at our old church. We didn't think we would. We'd kind of been happy to leave when we left, but when we came back, it was a very different church. Because when we left, there was no kids program. It had been struggling a bit and kind of dwindling. And when we went back, it had a new minister had turned up, and there'd been a big revival. There were a whole heap of young families. There were 70 kids in the Sunday school program.
That's a lot.
So it was absolutely pumping.
Yeah.
And we went round to a bunch of different churches and kind of we did like three weeks at a bunch of different churches, and surprised ourselves by going back to the same church, which it wasn't the same church. It still had a bunch of the same people.
Yeah.
But it was a soft landing for us because there were a whole lot of friends there, and family, as it were, family of God. So, and that was a real crisis, because it was, strangely enough, it was harder moving back than it was moving over. And I actually got talking to our minister there at Sylvania, and he said, it's actually a thing. It's called reverse
Culture shock?
Yeah, reverse culture shock. Yeah. Reverse culture shock, where it's harder to come home because you actually, I think, and we kind of came to figure it out. It's you realise that you're never going back to that part of life that you had over there. Whereas when you leave home, there's always a part of you that thinks, I'll probably be back. But having said that, we've been back to where we lived kind of semi-regularly. We haven't been back now for about 4 or 5 years, but we're going back every couple of years for a while there. Yeah. And we've kept in touch with friends over there, and we've got lifelong friends.
That's really cool.
Yep. So we keep pretty closely in touch with all of them.
It's very similar to Amy, who was on the last episode, that she moved a lot too, and has it like, obviously not as old as you, but has similar stories and that kind of stuff. Right. That she was ready to move at the right time, which is interesting that you had that experience. So probably my final question, I suppose, is how did you end up at Soul Revival Church?
Yeah, so we'd been back. We were back at our old church at Sylvania Anglican, and we stayed there for quite a while. And eventually, as our kids grew, all of our girls, they initially, because they were only little when we came back, they grew up through Sunday school there. Yep. And then, some things changed at Sylvania Anglican. As our girls grew, they went to Christian school here. Mm-hmm. They went to Shire Christian, and they developed friendships and went off to other churches. So they're now at other good churches in the Shire. We just felt that the time had come to move on from Sylvania. We felt that we'd been serving there in our ministries for quite a while, and we'd pray about it, and just feel that the Lord was prompting us to move on, and so that was when we just started looking around, and we'd it wasn't a slam dunk that we came to Soulies. We looked around a bit and prayed about some different churches, and by God's blessing, we kind of wound up here, and we've been really happy here. We've been here. We started here at the beginning of 2020, so kind of been here almost 2 years. Okay. Admittedly, an interrupted 2 years.
It's been a pretty wild 2 years.
Yeah. But we're really enjoying it. Yeah, we're loving the community group we're in, and the friends that we've met, and we're really enjoying it here.
That's fantastic.
Surprised at how much we've really enjoyed it, considering it's been so different.
It has. It's been a pretty tumultuous few years, and it's been. I can imagine it being difficult to not blend in, but to settle in. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, when you can get this opportunity to start settling in, then bam, we're online twice. So that's a pretty hectic turn of events, but it's really cool that you've been able to do that. And I guess you've had a little bit of practice settling into different things.
True.
That's probably why it's been a bit easier, because you've had the experience.
And you're very, very deliberate about going and talking to people and engaging people.
Yeah, I've seen you do that, for sure. Yeah. Well, just you going and talking to people is a great encouragement, but it's been, I think we should wrap it up because we might run out of space on the SD card. But it's been really encouraging listening to you, and I think the thing that I've got out of hearing your stories is that we need to trust God in all circumstances. And as you said, like you quoted the verse from Romans 8 as well, but just the fact that whether it's a difficult time or an easy time, if we're trusting God, then there will be an answer for us. And I mean, like I was speaking to Amy on the last episode and saying that I've never moved anywhere. Like I've stayed in the Shire all my life, except when I was born in Canberra, like Amy was, and then moved up with my family.
Were you born in Canberra?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to that.
Listen to the episode, man.
I haven't listened. It only came out this morning.
Yeah, it did. But that's I think that's the greatest encouragement I've got from you, John, and I really appreciate you coming on and telling us that, because I think it's been really fun, and this is why we do Chip Lunch. It's because we don't.
I can see.
First of all, your story is not boring.
Not at all.
That's what we should find. Not a boring story might be the title of this episode. But I think it's been fascinating. Do you want to wrap it up, Ethan? Anything to add?
No, I was just going to say I thought I had a title which I really liked.
Oh, please! Here's the final title.
It was called it the Holy Spirit in a Crisis. I thought that was really cool.
In crises.
In crises. But that was what I was playing around with in my brain. Because I think that was something that was constantly touched on. It was just this,
that is true.
Like at every point of whether it be a point of change or whether it be a point of crisis, it was something happened in your life. Something was moved in your life by the Spirit, and whether it be changing churches, whether it be changing countries, it was really cool and really encouraging for me to see. As someone, I'm getting married in January, and I've been thinking about how that is a really big change, and I don't think it'll be a crisis. I hope not, but no,
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. No, it'll be a really big change, and I've been really encouraged today thinking about through all change, God is there. And,
good and bad. Through good and bad, God is there.
And that's a huge encouragement for me. So thank you very much. I've been. It's been awesome.
To wrap it up, it's cool how you're like, every time there's a crisis, go to the Bible, go to
Yep.
God's word, and then
Yep.
pray.
Yeah.
Like that's
Every time.
what
Yeah,
it's
that's
all
right.
about.
That's the theme.
Yeah,
that's the
that's
theme.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on, John.
All
We
right,
really
that's
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure.
Cool.
Guys, if you're listening, you can catch our other podcast, The Shock Absorber, on any podcast app or also on YouTube. So check that out if you like. We also got a couple of digital services that come on probably up until at least the end of lockdown. They're coming up on the screen. Oh, he's fantastic. We just make these editors work harder. It's great.
He puts it there every week.
He
anyway.
does,
It's
because he
good.
does a great job. Thank
Yeah.
you, Dave, again, for editing and producing.
Yeah.
And John, we always like to finish up the episode with a one way. So you ready to go?
Got it.
All right, ready?
Oh my God.